Facebook. So hello, everybody. My name is Joél-Léhi Organista. I'm the National Vice President of Youth with LULAC, the League of United Latin American Citizens. And we are super excited to be live on Facebook doing this event, a timely event for our community. We're super excited to have two candidates that are running to be the governor of Utah. And the primary is coming up very, very soon. So it's very important for people to know, if they haven't already sent in their ballot in, to know who they're voting for. So the purpose of this event is to help the Latino community in Utah be more informed about the different candidates that are potentially going to be our governor. And it's lots of questions were submitted by different people across the state that are Latino and Latina. And we are super excited to ask these questions today. So we have our first candidate, and we're actually going to have a special guest introduce our candidate. So we have Carolina Wright, and we'll pass it to you so you can introduce.
Ok, bueno, gracias por tenernos aquí. Estamos con mucho ánimo de estar con usted y tu grupo. Gracias. Quiero presentar a mi esposo. Thomas Wright, tenemos 22 años de casados, tenemos 4 hijos y bueno, ese tiempo es muy complicado ahora. Estamos con un virus que ha cambiado la campaña bastante para mi esposo. Sus planes fueron a viajar todo el estado y conocer a toda la gente y lamentablemente eso no fue posible. Entonces ha tenido que cambiar un poco su estrategia, pero aquí estamos y bueno, mi esposo nunca ha ocupado un cargo elegido públicamente antes. Es el único candidato así. Y bueno, también tiene experiencia y ha sido un líder voluntario en el Partido Republicano, trabajando bien fuerte para elegir candidatos a servir a nuestro estado. Estoy muy orgullosa de él. Él es un buen oyente, tiene un corazón de oro, realmente es un luchador y yo sé que tiene la experiencia, tiene la visión y tiene el ánimo necesario para guiar a nuestro estado. Tomás.
What an introduction, wow.
Yeah, wow, that's amazing. Gracias.
Sí.
Gracias, Carolina. Yes, quick question. Are your kids bilingual too?
Oh, I wish. I wish. No, they're not. I mean, a little bit here and there. And sometimes when I get really mad, they know I'm mad when I start talking in Spanish. So, yeah.
Sounds totally normal. Me too.
Yeah.
Wow, thank you for the introduction. As mentioned, we have a lot of great questions that we want to ask today. And so we're going to get right into it. So the first question. So let me get the questions up here. So today is Juneteenth. Juneteenth is an important day in U.S. history when slavery was ended. And so do you support Juneteenth becoming a potential statewide holiday? And also, in addition to that, would you be interested in, as Representative Sandra Hollins in the state legislature, in proposing to take the word slavery out of the Utah Constitution?
Great questions. Today is a great day. I think it was 155 years ago today, we started to celebrate, right? That in other words, we abolished slavery in this country. I think we should celebrate it. I think it's an important part of who we are as a people. And as we do our best to stamp out racism in our society by talking about it, by acknowledging it, what better way than every year to remember our Black heritage in this country and how important it is to who we are as a country, and the fabric of our great country is diversity. And so I would absolutely support it. Today we had the opportunity to go and meet with some folks and participate in some events. And it's just fantastic to get out and to learn about other cultures and other people and to hear other voices that aren't necessarily your own. And we need to do that more in this country. We need to understand each other better. And it's time we acknowledge that even though the Civil Rights Act was passed a long time ago, that we and slavery ended a long time ago, we are still working on a lot of things in this country related to race. And Caroline and I are committed to being part of that solution.
Awesome. Great. Gracias. So
the next question is, what has your lieutenant governor running mate done to support and help the Latino community within their elected leadership roles in the past?
Great question. Congressman Bishop, I know for certain, I wish he was here to answer this because I know how passionate he is about this, but he's been in elected office for a really long time. Before that, he was also the chairman of the Utah Republican Party. And having been the chairman myself, I know how much time we spend with the auxiliary groups in the Utah Republican Party to bring that needed diversity, to listen to those minority groups, and to learn from them to make sure that all voices are heard inside the party. So I know that we have, a Latino assembly, a Black assembly. We have a lot of groups in the Republican Party that we embrace. And so as a chairman and Rob as a chairman, we've both done our very best, and we need to continue to push the envelope to make sure that everybody feels included in our great party and that everyone's voice is heard.
awesome. Great. The next question is about ballot initiatives. There's only one question on this.
It's an easy question. Will you respect the decision of voters when they have enough votes to pass ballot initiatives?
Good question. I've been pretty vocal about, I'm not a huge fan of ballot initiatives. I think our government is set up as a republic, so we elect people and they're supposed to go and represent us. When they don't do that, our recourse is to replace them. And that's one of the reasons I'm running in this race, is I think my three opponents have had their chance. They've served in the top three positions in this state, and I don't believe in career politics. I think we need to elect new people with new ideas, and we need to hold the people that we've elected accountable. So that's the first place for me. I wish we could get a more engaged electorate. Our voter turnout in Utah is really low. We need to hold the people accountable that we're electing, because we have a constitution that has checks and balances, and it has three branches of government. The legislative branch is the branch that's supposed to be legislating and creating laws. And then the executive branch enforces them, and the judicial branch interprets them if there's ever a question about them. When we put things on the ballot, what we're basically saying, in my opinion, and I think there's an instance when we should use that and we can use that, but when we put things on the ballot, what we're saying is that our elected officials are not necessarily listening to us. And I'll be honest with you, these last few years, we've seen a pattern of this, right? And so, man, I want to inform people and educate people and motivate people to go to the polls and take action by electing people who represent them and will do the things that they like. But to answer your question directly, when we have a ballot initiative and the public votes on it and their voice is heard, yes, I will respect the voice of the people. They do have a constitutional right to add things to the ballot, but I believe it should be used judiciously and conservatively and modestly. I don't think we should start to govern like that, because I think there's a lot of unintended consequences. But I want to be really direct and tell you, yes, I will respect the voice of the people when there's a ballot initiative and it passes.
Awesome. Great. Yeah, we just wanted to have that general question, because there's a lot of ballot initiatives that we can go into, but I think the general question, I think you answered it very well, and I think it's very helpful for voters to know that.
Thank you.
Cool. The next one's about the environmental issues.
This is fun. I like being with you guys. You guys got great questions.
Yeah.
It's environmental issues.
Oh, okay, awesome. Cool. So do you support the permanent protection of Utah's remaining wildlands throughout the deserts and mountains as wilderness or national conservation areas?
Well, we have some amazing land in Utah, don't we? We live in one of the most amazing places in the world, really. And it's got to be the most geographically diverse state in the country. You can go from the granite cliffs of the Little Cottonwood Canyons to the Red Rock Canyons and Slot Canyons in southern Utah. We have some incredible geography. And it's our job to preserve those and to conserve them for future generations. And so while we do need to continue to make sure that we have access to our own public lands in the state of Utah, just like every other state does, we need to preserve and conserve the areas that are most precious. And we do that with national parks. We do that with national forests, as you outlined. And yes, I'm a big outdoorsman. I've been hunting, fishing, camping, and hiking as a young man and an adult with my children in a lot of these areas in Utah. I love them. I want my great grandkids to enjoy them long after I'm gone. And so Governor Wright will do everything he can to preserve those pristine areas while simultaneously fighting to make sure that we can get back some of the public land that really should be in control of the state.
Awesome. We went camping on Memorial Day weekend as siblings, and it was great.
Where'd you go?
Grateful. It's like little Grand Canyon, something like that. I forgot what
Oh,
it's called.
yeah.
Beautiful.
Really fun.
Are we live in an amazing place? I mean, it's incredible. It's incredible.
Yeah, and so I'm glad that you're here to protect the. We live in Rose Park, the west side of Salt Lake City, so we live close to the wetland. And so we love just being able to go to ride our bikes or just walk into like where Legacy Highway is and like see the nature there. And so, yeah.
Oh, you know what? I don't mean to interrupt you, but I've said in this campaign, until you've seen a sunrise or a sunset in the marshes of the Great Salt Lake, you really haven't seen Utah. A lot of people view those areas as kind of like the Great Salt Lake is, a stagnant body of water, and it's something you just fly in, over or fly out over. But there is an ecosystem out there. It's an incredible ecosystem, and it's one of the most beautiful gifts we have in the state of Utah. I like to go out there a lot. And so I know right where you're talking about, where you go along Legacy Highway. But until you've seen that, you haven't seen the fullness of Utah.
Beautiful.
We get to see it all the time since we were right here. And so we're happy. So this next question is about the economy.
All right.
Awesome. So the cost of living is rising. The minimum wage in Utah is $7.25, which is the same as the federal minimum wage. The state minimum wage last changed in 2008, 12 years ago, when it was raised by 70 cents from $6.55 to $7.25. There was a proposal by the state lawmakers back in 2019 to raise it to $12 per hour. Amazon has lots of employees in Utah and has $15 per hour minimum wage. It's 2020. Do you think it's time to raise the minimum wage in Utah?
Well, the best way to raise wages, as you know, is to create a vibrant economy. And the best way to create a vibrant economy is to deregulate it, get government out of the way, reduce taxes for everybody so everybody gets to benefit. And when citizens have more of their money and they keep more of their money, they do things like invest with it, buy homes, they start businesses. And that's how you create economic activity. So I'm not a huge proponent of a mandatory minimum wage, because the best way to raise wages and to create upward mobility in our society is to create a business-friendly climate. And Utah's consistently been one of the states in this category. If you look at places like Seattle that have dramatically raised the minimum wage, I hope you'll go read that study. It had some really big unintended consequences. So I'm happy to have the conversation about it. I can't tell you that I'm supportive of it, but I'm willing to listen. I'm willing to consider it. But I want you to know that the best way to raise wages for everyone, even those at the minimum wage, is to create a vibrant economy. Because in the economy we had before the coronavirus, you couldn't hire people for minimum wage because there wasn't enough employees and the economy was too good. That's the kind of economy we want. And then we're not capping people. We're allowing them to have as much upward mobility as they can. And we saw that in the last economic run-up. And we're still seeing it now in the state of Utah. I want everybody to earn a living wage, but the best way to do that is not by regulating people to pay it and forcing them. It's by creating a vibrant economy. And that's what we'll do in the state of Utah when I'm governor.
Awesome. Great. So the next two questions about education. So I'm an educator. I taught high school for a while. I know I look young, but I used to be a high school teacher. And I currently teach at the University of Utah. The state school board used to be nonpartisan races. Now they're partisan races. This is just recently changed. I'm also running for the school board locally in Salt Lake City, and it's nonpartisan. And I love that it's nonpartisan because education shouldn't be partisan, I think. But yeah, so it's changed recently, the state board, to being partisan. Would you potentially be interested in having the state board of education races to go back to nonpartisan races rather than having it stay as partisan races?
Yeah, the goal that we have to have with public education is creating the best outcome for students that we can create. It's not about the processes. It's not about the elections. It's about putting people on the state school board that will do one thing: improve outcomes for students. We need to solve our teacher shortage. We need to increase pay for teachers. I've said that consistently in this campaign. We need to get the government out of the classroom and out of the way and let teachers teach. It's so miserable to teach. We got to get the government out of the classroom, right? And trust you and other professional educators to do the job of helping our students. Now, that's been a challenge. And because that's been a challenge, there's been some friction. I'm honest. I tell it how it is. I'm not a professional politician, so maybe that's what I'm not supposed to do. But the state school board has had some tension. And some people feel like the decisions that they make weren't representative of the public. Now, I'm not here to tell you if that's true or not. What I'm here to tell you is, as governor, I'm the only candidate for governor that has committed to go to every state school board meeting when I'm elected. That's a big commitment, and I'm going to do it when I'm elected. But we need somebody that will go in and advocate for education. And let me just tell you, everywhere I go around the state, all 29 counties, the number one thing I get asked about is public education. And when I'm in those meetings, there's usually 20, 30, 40 people. I say, hey, who here knows who their state school board representative is? How many hands do you think go up in a group of 30 people?
Maybe one.
Maybe one. The one time it happened, she raised her hand and said, I'm the state school board member. I'm not kidding. And so you cannot govern education. We cannot govern education in this state when citizens don't know who their state school board member is. I remember Caroline not long ago going to our state school board members, a meeting that she was hosting or somebody in the neighborhood was hosting. Yeah. And she came home so inspired and said, wow, that lady's amazing. She had some incredible ideas. We need to make sure people know who their state school board member is. And what we're doing is we're tweaking the system to compensate for an electorate that doesn't know who's running and who's responsible for public education. Wouldn't you agree? And this tinkering isn't going to create better outcomes. So I don't want to focus on these kind of like these decisions of yesteryear. I want to focus on one thing. How do we educate our kids in the best way possible? And if that means changing the way that things are done, as you asked, then I'll consider those. But I don't want to go in as governor and start focusing on the processes and tweaking things and putting Band-Aids on big open wounds. I want to go in and have huge systemic change to improve the outcomes for our students.
Awesome. That's good to hear, especially that commitment of going to state school boards. I've gone to it. I used to be the appointed advisor on equity issues for the state school board.
Okay.
Go often have meetings, and they are long, but I'm sure you're used to long meetings anyway. So better talk.
I was the Republican Party chairman. I know about long meetings. Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, don't you agree? A governor can do very little for public education if we're just being honest. Mm-hmm. It's the legislature that approves the budget. It's the state school board that implements it. The money goes to the local school districts. The governor really doesn't have that much authority, but he or she does have the bully pulpit, meaning the ability to talk about it in the media. So if you're in the state school board meetings and you're listening and you're learning and you're a part of the system, then you can really advocate for education and really make a difference, right? It'd be easy just to stay and not go to the meetings and say, well, that's not my decision. Go talk to the school board. I don't want to do that. I want to be a partner. Even though I don't have a seat at the table and I'll just be a spectator like any other citizen, I will be there to listen, learn, and advocate for public education.
Yeah, thank you for that response. That's
Sure.
A big commitment and a really important commitment. So you mentioned that you want the best type of education for students, especially if it's like research-based, probably you want that. That's research and it's proven to be best. So this question is about that. So ethnic studies in high schools. The National Education Association, which is the largest teacher union, found that there is considerable research evidence that well-designed and well-taught ethnic studies curricula have positive academic and social outcomes for students. And in a 2016 study, researchers at Stanford University showed that ethnic studies courses helped high school students increase their educational outcomes, their attendance, and their credits earned. Research found that students' GPAs also increased by 1.4 GPA. Their attendance also rose to 21%, and credits earned were increased by 23. Would you be open to potentially supporting the growth of ethnic studies in Utah high schools, especially given the fact that it is academically proven to be successful for all students, and many students don't know the history of racial groups in the United States? Also, one of the things is I teach ethnic studies at the University of Utah. That's what I teach. And so many states, Arizona, California, Texas, New York, they teach ethnic studies in the high schools. It is not required, but it's an option where people can learn about ethnic groups and their social history, their economic history, the political history in the United States. And many people clearly, as we're seeing, many people don't even know what Juneteenth is. And that's because ethnic studies is not taught.
Yeah.
So would you be open to potentially having ethnic studies in high schools?
Well, I can't think of a better day to talk about this than on Juneteenth, right? The fact that we're today learning and talking about other cultures, today's Black culture, right? And Black history and emancipation, all of those things that are so important to our history, and to celebrate that and to recommit ourselves to listening and learning and being part of the conversation for freedom and justice in our country. You have to know, when you're voting for somebody, it's so much more important to know what their governing principles are than almost it is where they are on some of these issues. Because if you know who they are and you know what their principles are, you can predict what decision they'll make in a lot of different instances. So let me tell you what mine is, and then I'll answer your question directly. I believe in local control. I think in government, when the government closest to the people is making the decision, it's going to be a better decision than a government that's really far away. We see that with the federal government. When they make decisions for us in Utah, they're usually not very good for Utah, right? They're a long way away. A lot of them have never been here. They don't know a lot about our people. They don't know a lot about our culture. A lot of them have never seen our geography. So it's really hard for them to make good decisions because they're just so far away. The same is true of state government and for education. We have local school boards, as you know, local school districts, and we need to make sure that we allow them and the parents in those local boards to decide what the curriculum is and how they want to educate their children. Because what we do in Washington County may be different than what we do in Salt Lake City. What we do in Park City might be different than what Tooele wants to do. I don't believe in a one-size-fits-all model for very many things. I think local citizens have the right to make local decisions for their children that they think are best. Now, I can't think of anybody who wouldn't want to learn about other cultures. I would love to come to your class. Maybe I can sneak in.
And can I say one thing?
Yeah.
I was a Spanish major at the University of Utah, and I took several ethnic studies classes that were absolutely amazing. So I applaud you for what you're doing. And I'm telling you, it was a life changer for me. Yeah.
And you've talked about it. Yeah, so I can't, but I love what you said, how the courses are optional and people can decide if they wanted to take them or not. But I want you to know, I think it sounds exciting. I would love to take those courses. I have a lot to learn. I would love to learn that if I was a student. But I also, if state government mandates a one-size-fits-all on this, then they'll mandate a one-size-fits-all on other things that we may not want. So I'm happy to encourage it. I'm happy to promote it. I'm a believer myself. But at the same time, I want local school districts to make those decisions for local citizens.
Awesome, cool. Yeah, I teach it. I teach in the fall and the spring. So yeah, you could come and sneak in one of my classes. They're going to be online maybe in the fall.
Oh my gosh, I would love to.
Let's do it. We really will, because we live near the University of Utah, so it'll be easy for us to do.
Yeah.
Just proximity wise. But if you'll let us know, we'll get permission. Wink, wink. But we want to come see one of your be a part of one of your courses.
Awesome.
That'd be great.
Awesome. So these next 3 questions are about racial justice issues, right? So especially it's a hot topic now. So and this one's a little bit connected to schools too, right? So you mentioned about education and how the legislature are in charge of that, but you kind of sign as a governor, right? And you approve whatever they pass. And so Utah schools could see an up to 10% cut in proposed funding this summer under a plan considered this Wednesday by legislative budget subcommittees. The cut would be around $385 million. The question came from some people, especially the comments talking about how come it seems radical to say defund the police, but it's not radical to say defund education.
Yeah, well, good question. So today is Friday. The legislature met yesterday, and they held education harmless in any budget cuts or adjustments. Now, we're going to have to deal with 2021. That's a future conversation, right? We're talking about making sure that 2020 works with the short revenue we're getting based on, the pandemic and the economic adjustment. But the legislature, you know what? They totally stepped up. And I want to thank the legislature, legislative leadership, and everybody involved in making sure that education was put in a #1 priority and that it was held harmless. So fortunately, those cuts that you're talking about didn't happen. And so we can spend our time smiling and being happy that they didn't. But I will tell you, 2021 will be difficult. And the very first thing the next governor will do is I'll be introducing my budget for 2021. And it will be a really difficult assignment because of our revenue shortfall. So this is where, getting back to what I said before, knowing somebody's principles will help you determine what they will do. I believe public education is our #1 priority. It would be the last thing that I would cut. And I want people to know that I'm dead serious about that. There's nothing in this state that's a bigger priority than our children and educating our children and making sure that they're ready for the workforce and to compete in a global marketplace. So to me, that would be the very last thing that I would cut. But fortunately, the legislature didn't do that on Wednesday, as you said. So we're home free right now. We got to elect a governor that's going to make it happen when the budget for 2021 is introduced.
Yeah, they did mention a increase in wages for teachers, which was like a huge victory, especially knowing in February, like one of the last big demonstrations before COVID happened was the teachers that walked
Right.
up and were at the Capitol. And many of those teachers are my friends, right? Like I said, I used to teach high school. And I think it's really amazing to know and understand that teachers are expected to do so much and they get paid so little. And I think this pandemic has exposed that, and I'm grateful, like you are, that the state stepped up and prioritized not only education but teachers specifically. And so
yeah, and I'll just say too that march and things you've done as teachers, you guys are fantastic. I'm a big supporter of teachers, but I also think in this gubernatorial race, I will say I was the first one to talk about teacher pay. We need to pay our teachers more. It's become a central focus of this race. And I brought that to this race, and I'm really proud that I did. Every candidate, when there was 7 and now there's 4, everybody is always talking about teacher pay. And I'm not saying, you know, we all play a little role. We play a little role as candidates, but the more we talk about it, the more we advocate for it, the more action that we're going to see. So all of our efforts now, your event that you had earlier before the pandemic, the candidates talking about it, we're making it happen in Utah. And that's what I've always said as governor. If we talk about these things and we bring them to the public's attention, we can make dramatic improvements. And that's why I'm running. I'm not running because I need a job or because I want to be a politician. I'm running because I want to make a difference. And then I want to get out and go back to my business and my great family.
That's what it's all about, right? So
yeah.
We have one last question.
So this is a very difficult question. What are your plans for summer vacation? And
I'm gonna let Caroline answer that.
Okay, en español.
Sure.
Okay. Bueno, vamos a ir a la playa por 2 semanas y no vamos a hacer nada. Right? Tomando sol.
Like, all I heard is nada. And
nada.
Good.
Yeah, that's it. Con nuestros hijos.
And I heard playa, and I like that.
Y tenemos una hija que está por salir a servir una misión para la Iglesia de Jesucristo de los Santos de los Últimos Días y se va en 6 semanas. Entonces va a ser un tiempo muy especial para nosotros.
Qué bueno. Sí. Well, great. Do take that summer vacation. Like I said, I'm running, so I know how the primaries are, and I need a vacation too.
Well, hey, good luck in your primary.
Yes.
And thank you for running. Those state school board positions are so important. I wish more people knew.
Yeah.
So anyway, you're doing a great job. If we can ever help you in your race, let us know. But those are such important positions. They're not high profile like the governor's race, but they should be because there's so much important work being done there. So I hope you win, I'll win, and then we'll be together in those meetings. You can say, hey, you promised you were going to be there, buddy, and then you'll have to hold me accountable.
Yes, that's what I'm totally down to keeping people accountable.
Okay.
Yeah, all right.
Well, gracias.
Gracias a ustedes.
Answering this. This is, as mentioned, live on Facebook for people to share. I think you responded with a lot of important ways of the different issues our community was asking for. And so for the community that's watching, continue to ask questions online because the candidates can check this out too for the comments. And again, gracias, thank you. We have our other candidate on our waiting room, so we're gonna kind of switch to that candidate. But gracias, Thomas and Carolina.
Thank you.
Un placer.
Gracias. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, so while our next person starts setting up their video, as mentioned, we have a lot of great questions that we received from the public, and so we also are seeing our comments on the comment section part. And so thank you for those that are putting comments. We're just waiting for Governor Huntsman to show his video. Can you hear us?
I can hear you, friends. How are you? Hola.
Good. How are you?
Technology.
No, you're good. We're matching.
I kind of like that. You look better than I do.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hear him?
Yeah. Can you hear us?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Awesome. Cool. So thank you, Governor Huntsman, for jumping on for this this town hall. Lots of people are really excited to ask you questions. So we have these questions, but even before we start, I don't know if you remember, but back in 2009, so that's like 11 years ago, you got an award. It was from the Inclusion Center. Back then, they might have been named the NCCJ.
NCCJ,
yeah,
that's
NCCJ.
right.
You got a Humanitarian and Social Justice Award back in 2009. And at the Little America, you got that. And that year, I also got that same award with you. I was a high schooler at the time. I don't know if you remember that.
Of course, I remember every minute of it.
Yeah, so now I'm all grown up.
How could I forget? My goodness. Well, again, congratulations on that. I'm sure you're a much better person.
Yes, I'm older. I'm you know, a little older now, but yeah, we have that big, looks like a fishbowl award. It's like a really big glass thing.
Yeah, no, I still have that. I cherish it.
Yeah, and so I'm super excited.
NCCJ.
Yeah, the NCCJ was the one that gave it. So and it's glad to reconnect with you again.
Thank you.
And so we're, like I said, we're super excited. And to review, LULAC is the League of United Latin American Citizens. It's the oldest and largest Latino civil rights organization in the country. It's 91 years old, and it's a lot of history of doing civil rights for the Latino community. And with LULAC, I'm one of their national vice presidents, but I happen to live in Utah. And then this is my sister, Joél-Léhi.
Hi. How are you?
Great.
Good to see you.
So yeah, we're gonna start with these questions. The first one is all about what today is. So today is Juneteenth. So as you know, Juneteenth is the day we're remembering when slavery was abolished. And so would you be interested in supporting Juneteenth to become a potential statewide holiday? And also, especially with Representative Sandra Hollins, who's in the state legislature, and making sure that the Utah Constitution removes the term slavery in it.
Well, I think that absolutely should be looked at. This is a very important day, and it represents something that I think is very poignant in this sense. So the Emancipation Proclamation, which Abraham Lincoln was responsible for, took effect in January of 1863. And let's be honest about this. It wasn't. It was 100 years later, before the Civil Rights Act of 1964. 100 years. So does it take our country sometimes a little bit of time to become a more perfect union? So this is what makes the United States, you know, a very different country than any other that I have lived in or been exposed to. And this is the way I explain it to other people. We might not always practice what we preach perfectly, but we have a process in our country to debate, to demonstrate, to talk about, to argue, and ultimately to refine things that are injustices and those things that are grievances. And that makes us a more perfect union. And I think when we look at Juneteenth and the history that followed onto that for the next 100 years, all the way to 1964, that's an example of how long it took to get the Civil Rights Act in 1964. We got there. It took way too long, but we're still trying to become a more perfect union. And that's what makes the United States different and I think unique, is we always work on our faults, we work on our weaknesses, and we try to become stronger. And in order for us to do that, we have to have all voices included. So when LULAC takes up civil rights. When LULAC talks about protecting voter rights and economic opportunity and educational issues, you're in the debate, you're in the discussion, and this is where you should be. This is where we all should be. And this is one of the reasons that I love being a candidate and hope that I'm elected governor, is I had an ethnic affairs council when I was governor. It doesn't exist any longer. And it was, for me, a very important table, because around it sat representatives of our different communities. And Archie Archuleta, John Flores, people who were leaders in their day were very influential in my life because I learned so much from them. And now I have two grandsons who are half Hispanic. Their father is Dominican. And so I have Hadacito Hernandez and Hunter Hernandez. They are my grandsons. So I see the world increasingly through their eyes. And I look back on what I talked about and what I learned, what I listened to around that table of the Ethnic Affairs Council. And for me, it was really important because it brought to the forefront, to the governor, when I was governor, the issues that mattered most. And we could narrow the gap. We could look at what needed, we could build a chamber of commerce that brought businesses together and do some things that were really, really important for the fastest growing demographic in our state. So that's a long way of saying that we're celebrating, in a sense, Juneteenth, but we're also saying, okay, we have issues that always need to be worked on. We have debates that need to be had. We have people pouring into the streets, but we still have a country, and I hope we always will have a country that allows us to heal our wounds, which makes the United States very unique.
Thank you for your response. Yes, I think you're very right about the perfect union, and you have that international lens of talking to people that are not from the United States about the United States. So that I think that makes perfect sense. I served my mission in Japan, Tokyo. So,
oh my goodness. Okay.
So I talked about America all the time, and in Mexico, since I'm from Mexico too, to people in Japan, and it was important to help them understand because they had lots of questions at the time. And so, but yeah,
it does is because you've lived abroad, I've lived abroad. It makes you think long and hard about your system. It makes you look at it critically and in ways that maybe others don't, because you have to explain it to others who don't understand it, who don't live here, who maybe just read bad headlines. And you have to help explain to them kind of what a lot of the news means that they get. And that takes you right back to our history and our underpinnings and our foundation and the importance of immigration in freshening up our population and in providing new vitality and energy. And why debates continue that seem to never reach an endpoint. It's part of hopefully becoming a more perfect union.
Yeah. So that was our first question, which was, I think, a great way to start. So these next three questions are about appointments. And so you have experience in this. And so currently in the executive branch, based on the website that we found, there are 23 positions, spots in the executive cabinet, right? 80% of them are men. And there's 4 women on that. Also, there are 2 Latinos on the executive branch of a cabinet. That equals up to 0.08%. So not even 1% of the whole cabinet is Latino, but and then those are the only people of color. The rest, there's no Native Americans, no Asians, no Blacks, no Pacific Islanders on the cabinet. So would you commit to making sure that not only is there racial diversity, but gender diversity and other types of diversity on your cabinet?
Well, I picked a running mate by the name of Michelle Kafusi, and she has a wonderful family. I don't know if you've seen her family, but she's a remarkable mayor of Provo, and she has Steve Kafusi, her husband, who's a famous coach, and 2 sons who play for the New York Jets. And I've met them all, I know them all, and they're big dudes. And the whole family is very special, and I love them all. My family is very diverse. I have, as I mentioned, 2 half Hispanic grandsons, and I have 2 daughters who were not white. And I always see the world through their eyes. And I always ask, because I know they're thinking when they see the news play out, the protests in the street, George Floyd incidents. I know that they're looking at it differently than a lot of people, because I've seen in one case living abroad, my daughter getting treated differently than anyone else, put in the back of a police car for 20 minutes and asked for papers where nobody else was singled out of the crowd. It was completely based upon her ethnicity. And nobody knew that she was the daughter of the US ambassador. Maybe they did, I don't know. Maybe it was another form of harassment, but they've experienced, even in their young lives, some really interesting things that helps me to understand and to try to see the world through them. And so that's a way of saying I'm surrounded by diversity. I'm surrounded by what I think the future of Utah will increasingly look like. And I have in the person who I think will be the next lieutenant governor, somebody who exemplifies that. And I did my very best when I was governor before to bring in diverse people. But here's what I think is even more important. One of the reasons that the Ethnic Affairs Council was so important to me is because I would strongly encourage and cultivate young people to run for office from our different ethnic communities, to step up and not just, take a seat temporarily, but become part of the power structure, run for office, build a political base so your voice really matters. And when you have issues that come up, you're the person who people go to. And you've seen members of the Hispanic Latino community over the years who have been those people. We need more of them, and we need mentors and role models. And that begins even in education, where we look at the need for more teachers and administrators who represent maybe 2% of the overall, 3% of the overall, where our student population is many times that size. So I have a pretty good feel for this, having done it before, being surrounded by diversity and wanting to make sure that the executive branch will be adequately represented by not the past, but the future of the state of Utah.
Awesome. And
so what are you be doing for the next few years?
Me or both of us?
I'm just teasing you. I was going to say,
you're going to hear
notice and put you to work.
Yeah, I'll bring it up. One of the questions is about education, and I'm going to talk about my race. I'm actually running too, so I'll tell you about it. But this next question is about. So I think you brought up something that you created in the past that doesn't exist now, which I think would be great if it existed now, right? The committee. But currently in Utah, we have the different Utah divisions, right? The Utah Division of Multicultural Affairs, the Indian Affairs, Utah Serve, Arts and Museum. So those are the different divisions, right? So the Division on Multicultural Affairs has only 4 full-time staff. The Indian Affairs has only 3 full-time staff. The U Serve Utah has 9 full-time staff, which is more than both those other groups combined. And then the Arts and Museum have 20 full-time staff, which is twice as much as the other ones. So would you prioritize making sure that those, the Multicultural Affairs and the Indian Affairs has more full-time staff to support the needs and concerns of those the communities that they serve?
Well, you can go back and see what I did, because I'm not making promises, because I have a track record. And I'm proud of my track record, and you can go back and see exactly what I did. What is important is not that we have committees, because anyone can put a committee together, and just call it something. You meet once a year. That doesn't work for me. I want, and I used my Ethnic Advisory Council for purposes of real work, bringing up issues that matter, bringing young talent forward and putting them to work. Starting new chambers of commerce that didn't exist before, so people could begin to meet and build critical mass. That's what matters most to me. And how they're staffed is almost secondary to the prominence that the prominent role that they play, and whether or not the governor engages. That's what I will do. That's what I did, and that's what I will look forward to.
Awesome, cool. Well, this next question is going to be asked by my sister.
Perfect. So what has your Lieutenant Governor running mate done to support and help the Latino community with their elected leadership roles in the past?
One more time, could you ask that one more time?
What has your Lieutenant Governor running mate done to support and help the Latino community with their elected leadership roles in the past?
I don't know, but I do know this. I do know of her commitment to diversity. She is the first woman mayor of Provo. She is an historic figure. She has diversity in her own family. It's deep and it's broad. And I know of her heart, and I know of her commitment, and I know what she will do as lieutenant governor. And she will reach out and be a very, very inclusive type of leader.
Awesome, cool. This next one is about ballot initiatives. There's only just one question on this one.
So easy question. Will you respect the decision of voters when they have enough votes to pass ballot initiatives?
Well, if we have a ballot initiative process, which we do, and if the people speak, then I think we have to respect that. Yes.
Yeah, it's the easy question, right? I think you're right. So that was an easy
I don't
one.
know if it's a question or not, but you never know.
No, yeah, it's some candidates don't think that sometimes, right? So, so this one's about environmental issues.
Do you support the permanent protection of Utah's remaining wildlands throughout the deserts and mountains as wilderness or national conservation areas?
Well, we have the most beautiful lands in the world, and some of them are wilderness designated, some of them are national parks, some of them are state parks, and they're all very special. And I'll tell you what I will try to do. I want to double the number of state parks we have in Utah. I think our population is growing and we need more land that we can actually enjoy. And I think that would be one of the greatest legacies we could leave to the next generation. Just look at doubling the number of state parks. I haven't heard anyone else talk about that, but it's something I want to try to do.
Awesome, thank you. Yes, we do have the most beautiful land, I think, in the world. So this was about the economy.
Awesome. So the cost of living is rising. The minimum wage in Utah is $7.25, which is the same as federal minimum wage. The state minimum wage last changed in 2008, 12 years ago, when it was raised by 70 cents from $6.55 to $7.25. There was a proposal by the state lawmakers back in 2019 to raise it to $12 per hour. Amazon has lots of employees in Utah and has $15 per hour minimum wage. It's 2020. Do you think it's time to raise the minimum wage in Utah?
Well, I thought it was time to raise the minimum wage when I was governor before, because I was actually in favor of that. The way to do it is to bring in companies that are dedicated and committed to raising wages, well beyond the numbers you cited, just over $7. And a lot of companies are committed to that. And particularly in the post-COVID environment where companies have to rebuild, get back on their feet, where families have to rebuild, individuals have to rebuild. I think it'll be a really important time to look at incomes and to recruit and help support those companies here in the state that really do believe in higher wages for their workers. And those that do are going to get better workers. That's just the way the free market system works. So I believed in doing that before, and I still believe that we should be working toward higher wages, no question about it.
Awesome, that's great. You know, there's a lot. Utah's the youngest state, and there's a lot of my younger brother returned from his mission, and he's like, "Oh no, I don't know if I can try to get a $7 job, but you know, but I think yeah, there's a lot of young people that would benefit from this, including working families, right, that have multiple jobs." So this next one's about education. So this is now where I shine, right? Education. So I used to be a high school teacher, and I used to teach in the Salt Lake School District, and I'm running for the Salt Lake City School Board, and so I'm running right now for that. And so this question is about the state school board, though. So the state school board used to be a nonpartisan race. Just barely recently, it changed to partisan races now. So now you have to run as a Republican or Democrat or the party. luckily my local school board race is nonpartisan, which is great because I think education is nonpartisan, first of all. But would you be potentially interested in seeing how is the partisan races now with the state school board could potentially maybe go back if it seems like it would be better and less divisive if it becomes nonpartisan again?
Yeah, no, I like that. And I'm much more comfortable with the idea of nonpartisan board members, because I think it allows them to put politics aside and look to the well-being of the students and teachers and education generally. Otherwise, you break down into partisan discussions and debates just in the name of political division. And sometimes, that consumes time and energy, and you never get to the point of making decisions. I really do, and maybe I'm too old-fashioned on this, but I think education should be a nonpartisan kind of issue. We're going to disagree a little bit on some aspects of education, but I think we all kind of agree that local control, incentivizing and paying teachers what we think they're worth, getting a higher weighted pupil unit, helping early childhood development. I started the language immersion program in public schools, which is now the leading program in the country, where people can learn Spanish, French, Chinese, and by the time they finish, they do really, really well. I don't think that that's a partisan issue. I think that's just giving kids the kind of skills that they need to be more successful, to make higher than a minimum wage salary. So let's make sure that we understand that the world they're going to step into when they finish is going to be very competitive. And I have lived in China, and I have seen how they're preparing their kids for the future. And I have to say, and I'm not proud of this, but they're doing a better job than we are in preparing their kids, generally speaking. And that's why, for me, let's try to take partisanship out of education, stay focused on the bigger goal of being the very, very best we can. And so I happen to agree with you on that. I think that would be the right place for us to be.
Awesome, great. Yeah, it is very, it's a lot less stressful to be running in a nonpartisan race for school board locally. So yeah, I'm glad you agree. This next question is about ethnic studies in high schools. So the National Education Association, which is the largest teacher union in the country, found that there is a considerable amount about research evidence that well-designed and well-taught ethnic studies curricula have a positive academic and social outcomes for students. And in 2016 study, researchers by Stanford University showed that ethnic study courses helped high school students increase their educational outcomes, their attendance, their credit earns. The research found also that it increased the GPAs up to 1.4 points, their attendance by 21%, and class credits earned up to increased by 23. So would you be open in supporting the growth of ethnic study classes in Utah high schools, given the fact that they are academically, that they help increase academic success for all students, and also understanding that, especially now, lots of people do not know the history of lots of racial groups in the United States. And as this would be optional classes, right? But the increase of this would be helpful, especially knowing that California, Arizona, Texas, New York, all have ethnic studies in Utah schools. And I teach ethnic studies at the University of Utah. So we do have it in the university level, but we don't have it in the high school levels. But would you be interested in making sure that there's an increase of options for ethnic studies in high schools in Utah?
I have 4 ethnicities in my family. It's something we talk about around the dinner table all the time. And we learn a lot about different ethnicities and different cultures. And I know every family is not like mine, but if our local officials thought that that was a good idea, I would leave it in their hands. Personally, I think that that's you've made a strong argument, and I happen to agree with that, because it really is focused on the future as opposed to the past. And that's preparing the next generation of citizens. And again, in becoming a more perfect union, like we talked about before, let's try to imagine what our community is going to look like, not today, but in 20 and 30 years. And that may be helpful. But instead of the NEA making the decision, I think it's an important thing to let our local education officials make that decision. And I think they would probably consider it.
Awesome. So that's about education. And this one's about a little bit connected with education. This week, it just happened, right? The special session's happening with the legislature. And just earlier this week, they were proposing to do cuts on education up to 10%, which would have been $385 million. Luckily, yesterday they didn't do it, so that's great. It was actually a very happy thing, but they increased it by they increased teacher pay in the state by 2%, over 2%. So would you continue to prioritize not defunding education, but investing in education?
Well, again, I have a record. I can't promise things because I actually have a record when I was governor. And if you go back and look at what I budgeted and what we got through the legislature in some of the years that I was governor, when adjusted for inflation, they were the highest amounts ever allocated for and appropriated for education. So my answer is yes, because that's what I've done, not what I'm talking about. And I mentioned, I don't know if you saw the debate a couple of nights ago, but all of the candidates had a debate. And I said at the time, this is the day before the special session, that for me, if I were governor today, I would want to make sure that education was held harmless, which it was, and I want to give kudos to the legislature, but also human services, to include specifically mental health, because I think this is a very stressful time for people in our state. I don't think we have any idea. COVID-19 is a health issue. I know that because I've had it for the last week and a half. Now my wife does, but it's also an economic issue, and it's also a mental health issue. And I think we have to look at it through the prism of each of those, and understand that there are people in the state who I think are suffering a period of deep despair. They're out of a job. They have nowhere to turn. Their prospects maybe are not certain, short term, maybe not even long term. And it's a very stressful time for a lot of people right now. So human services, and specifically mental health, I think it's important to stay focused on that as well. And you got to remember, we have $1 billion in the rainy day fund. So, and that's good management on the part of the legislature, so that during times like this, we have a little more flexibility.
Yeah, thank you, especially for adding that last part. When I taught high school, I taught health, which is all about mental health, physical health, healthy relationships, substances, right? Drugs and alcohol, sex ed, all of those are important issues, very personal to me, is teaching high schoolers, right? So I'm glad you brought up mental health for that. So this next one's about, especially with what's happening right now with police reform, right? So there's the idea and the concept and the practice of community-controlled civilian review boards that have been shown to keep the bad cops held accountable in the community level without the conflict of interest with what we have currently, which is a different police department investigating and reviewing the case. HB 415, which was passed, restricts the community-controlled civilian review boards. However, it does not restrict this within municipalities. And so would you be open to reviewing and seeing that what other police reform is possible, especially since this is an important topic for not only the Latino community, where in Memorial Day weekend, Bernardo was killed. One of our Latinos who lives in our community was killed, and the body cam footage was only released 2 weeks ago after the department said that they would release it 10 days, but they didn't. And so would you be interested in other police reform, especially community-controlled review boards, as a potential option to keeping the bad cops accountable?
Everybody wants accountability, and I think the police departments want accountability as much as anybody. They want to be part of the solution. I know this because I've talked to so many of them. and they want the training and they want the support that will make them better at what they do. So as governor, you have an opportunity to lock arms with the police, with law enforcement, and with those who feel they have been aggrieved, those who are in the streets and they have legitimate concerns and points of view. What is important and what I think we need to work toward is listening to each other, because we talk a lot and we talk past each other. We're so used to watching cable shows on television, cable news, and all people do is talk past each other. It drives me crazy. America works best and the state works best when we actually sit down with a sense of respect one for another. And we listen and we try to understand what the other person is saying and what a group is saying. And, I don't represent the police departments or law enforcement, but I suspect that they want to be part of a process like that helps them be better. And you can only do that if we're sitting around a table together and we're understanding one another. That's the way that so I remember the 1960s. You guys are way too young to remember that, but I remember the 1960s. We had inner cities burning across America. We had a war in Vietnam. We had beloved leaders who were assassinated. A president, Martin Luther King, the president's brother when he was running for president himself. And we had a president resign. I mean, that's how crazy that period was. And we had very tense race relations and people spilling out into the streets. But we got through it and we found the right kind of discourse because we had leaders who cared and were respected, who stood up and were able to bring people together. And that's how we still must function. Becoming a more perfect union. We've said that a couple of times already. How do we become a more perfect union? It isn't by standing aside. It isn't by talking past one another. It's by sitting at a table and saying, with law enforcement present, what are the issues that are on your mind? And those who have been aggrieved, who feel that there has been law enforcement brutality. And the numbers would suggest that they have some legitimate issues. And that's how you begin a process that is ultimately to an endpoint. So, yeah, you've spelled out some issues that really do have to be worked on, and I wouldn't want to be part of that. It's what I enjoy about leadership positions is you can bring about change. You can transform communities because they won't transform themselves unless the people do. And the people respond to signals from leaders when they get together and try to fix some of the broken issues. And that's what needs to be done right now. You hear it in the streets. And when people take to the streets, that's a signal that something is broken.
Yeah, that's refreshing to hear about that. That's what leadership is about. I teach leadership at the University of Utah. And so, yes, I agree with you in terms of that's what needs to be happening with leadership. This question's about DACA. So yesterday, a big announcement was done with the Supreme Court, right? Where they what's the word? Pronounced, or they said they made a decision, right? That was the opinion, right? The laws, right? They had the opinion that DACA can stay, right? Which is a temporal band-aid on the big immigration reform that needs to be happening, right? So Utah has almost 10,000 DACA recipients. Utah was one of the first states to allow in-state tuition for undocumented high school graduates so that they go to college. Utah is...
And what year did that happen?
I was back in 2000s, early 2000s, yeah. And
who was governor then?
Tú. You know Spanish? You.
Well, yeah, the point is, we probably have 800,000. You mentioned the number here in the state. We probably have 800,000 who are in the deferred program, which continues to be deferred endlessly throughout the country. And so this was a real issue for me when I was governor. And I sat down when I was chairman of the Western Governors Association, which includes more than 20 Western states, half Republican, half Democrat. And we came together, and this was 10 years ago, and we wrote a template for immigration reform. And ultimately, if you go back and read it, that's exactly what's going to happen, what we spelled out. And it was dealing with DACA. It was dealing with the DREAM Act. It was dealing realistically with the kids of those who had no say over their journey in life, and they're now here. And so what are you going to do? Have a two-tiered society? That doesn't secure our future. That's not what America should be about. It should be about opportunity for all. But we have to make sure that we deal on the legal side, on the citizenship side, with a process that allows us to move forward. And that's what's broken. And nothing has frustrated me more than the whole immigration debate, because it has gone on and on and on and on. And ideas have been put forward. And I'm among those who have put ideas forward. And you can look back when I was governor at many things that we did here in the state to help support those who were here. And the reason we did that is because the federal government refused to act. And so some of us as governors said, we just can't let this go on. We have to do something in our own right. And I got criticized for it, still to this day. But I felt it was the right thing to do, because you can't leave people in the shadows who are here, and nobody is willing to address the prevailing issues at the federal level. You have to secure yourself for the future at a state level. And that's why some of those decisions were made when I was governor, and I'm sure beyond.
Yeah, and thank you for that. Yeah, I think Utah is a great example, from the Utah Compact that was created to the actual laws that were passed to support those that want to go to college and
Great.
Shouldn't pay international tuition, to also last year, those that are dreamers or DACA recipients can take the bar exam, especially if they went to law school and they want to be a lawyer, they can take the bar exam now, which is a great success here in Utah. And so I'm glad that you brought up that, yes, it's a federal issue, and we as a state have always been about solutions, and we want solutions. And so thank you so much. So we have our last question that my sister's gonna ask.
Okay. So what are your plans for the summer vacation or 4th of July?
Well, I'll be able to answer that better in about a week when the primary is over, and I know what the status of life is in the post-primary period. Because if we win the primary, as I think, and I hope we do, then our 4th of July will probably be spent differently than it might otherwise. But I have some kids here, and I have kids, Mary Kay and I do, outside of the state, including 2 who are serving in the U.S. Navy, and we don't get to see them very often. And one of them is a Navy pilot who just returned from the Middle East on a 10-month deployment on an aircraft carrier. And I haven't seen my grandson or him in a very, very long time. And we may take a little bit of time that you described during the summer to catch up with some family members. But if we win the primary, it may change that again. So who knows? But if you want to check in a week and a half, I'd be happy to be more specific about how we're going to spend the 4th of July.
Yes, and like I said, I'm running too, and I have a primary, and I'm just also the waiting game, right? But not so much waiting passively, right? We're all campaigning as much as possible,
Right.
and being proactive.
How is your campaign looking?
Well, there's 5 candidates, so it's pretty busy, like y'all's race. It's nonpartisan, which is nice. Yeah, and currently, I'm the only one that has a website out of the 5 candidates, so I feel a little bit more confident than the other ones. But you never know, right?
Well, good. It's been a real pleasure being with you, and thank you for giving me a little bit of time and allowing me to share some ideas with you. It's been a great pleasure.
No, thank you. It's a pleasure for us, and especially the Latino community is very grateful for all the candidates that came, especially you. These questions were written by them. As you saw, it's very connected to the concerns and the needs of the community. And yeah, we'll continue to remind people that today is the last day to register.
That is right. The last day to register, and we're just days away from the primary vote.
Yeah.
So everyone take this very, very serious. I know LULAC takes it seriously, and thank you for getting the message out there.
Yes, thank you. So you enjoy the next week and a half or whatever we have for the primary, and then hopefully you enjoy also the after that with the summer, even whatever the outcome is. I think it's important to take a break and rest, right? Which maybe you got to do a little bit with since you got sick, but I think everybody's cheering for everybody, because I think everybody that's running is a really good candidate, and we're super glad that all these people are going to be listening and continuing to listen to the needs of the community, of the Latino community. So thank you, Governor Huntsman, and you enjoy your weekend.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great pleasure being with you. Hope to see you again soon.
Sí, adios.
Adios.
So thank you everybody for watching today, our town hall. We're super grateful for all the people that are watching live. As mentioned, this is recorded, so you can share what we watched, especially since both of those candidates do have a primary to win. And so we want to make sure that our community is informed about these things. And so please also put your questions in the comments. We are able to email these questions to the candidates. The other two candidates in the Republican governor race were invited to, but did not accept our invitation. And that's why they were not on this town hall. But we are grateful for both of those candidates that were on here. And please continue to get involved. As mentioned, today's the last day to register to vote, including if you want to register as a Republican to vote for their specific primary. Otherwise, yeah, you should have already, if you registered already, you should have voted. Make sure to vote for all of your elections from the school board, city, state. And if you have any questions about elections or how to register, please check out our Facebook page, where we will post a link about how to register to vote, and information about candidates and their profiles. So thank you again for everybody that watched, and please stay safe and have a great weekend.